and Zoning Commission to order and ask that you stand with us as we say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Mr. Summer, call the roll, please.
Mr. Benberry?
Here.
Mr. Bradford?
Here.
Mr. Morrison?
Here.
Mr. Emke?
Here.
Mr. Shadle?
Here.
Mr. Wade?
Here.
Chair Casillas?
Here. Mr. Wade, I believe you have the minutes motion.
I move that the reading of the minutes for the April 1st, 2019 meeting be waived and the minutes of said meeting as prepared by the secretary be approved as written. Second.
Second by Bradford. Are there any corrections or comments to the minutes? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Benberry?
Aye.
Mr. Bradford?
Aye.
Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Mr. Emke?
Aye.
Mr. Shadle?
Aye.
Chair Casillas?
Aye. Mr. Ramke, you have the first item of business.
I move that this commission receive and file the application of Edward Francis and Melissa Ann O'Neill for the proposed re-subdivision of property located at 6701 and 6711 Turnberry Drive. I further move that the requested waiver of the public hearing and the dedication of streets not be given and approval of the submitted plat be denied.
Second.
Second by Shadle.
Let me explain staff's position on this. Back in January, we had a plat that came before you all that was subsequently approved because of a swimming pool in part. If y'all may remember, it would have been about 3 feet off the property line. Since then, I've gotten another request besides this one that hasn't came before you all yet to abolish the property line just solely based on the homeowners association fees. I did speak to a representative from the HOA association, and they're not willing to help homeowners that have more than one lot by simply rolling it into their system or however they bill that. Therefore, whenever we reviewed this plat in planning committee, the director and the other planners in the office, we felt that this is not related necessarily to land use. It's more of a ministerial billing problem with the homeowners association. Therefore, we are recommending denial on this based on that. What you have in front of you is a revised plat that I received this afternoon showing landscaping that Mr. Gardner sent me. And you can see that the driveway is partly on the lot and there is some landscaping on the lot. But this could be a viable lot, staff feels, because it is large enough. A new home that would be constructed on that lot could potentially sit approximately 80 feet off the road, where there's a home on Burchell Cove at the very end that sits 91 feet off the road. So we do feel that this is a viable lot if the homeowners do wish to sell it in the future. But Mr. Goins and Mr. Gardner are both here to answer any further questions you may have.
I have one of you, Josh.
Yes.
When it came before us in January in this subdivision, wasn't that lot unusable? If I recall, that another home could not have been put on there. It was not ideal.
It could have been. It was if I remember correctly, it was an 18,000 square foot lot. It was the smallest lot in the subdivision, but that lot line could have been angled in a different direction to maintain about the same size.
I thought it was like a ditch or a hole or something.
There was a hill on the other side of the house, yes.
It was not desirable from what I recall.
And they had to turn the swimming pool
the other
to
way.
run the same way as the house instead of making it long ways because of that hill.
Well, I'm here to represent the O'Neills. We obviously disagree with the land use. As you can see on your plat, the first plat showed the driveway, which is a concrete driveway, being used as ingress and egress to the property. as well as it has a basketball goal on it. It being used as a basketball small court. We have added the pool area where you see the brick columns and the wrought iron fence that surrounds the pool area that is concrete and has a pool house and all of that. Now, if this lot could not be sold separately because it would have all these encroachments, and there wouldn't, and the way he's landscaped it, he's kind of landscaped it, and if you ever go out there and just look at it yourself, you can tell it's being used as one lot, and its intention is to be used as one lot, and one lot only. But in his case, he's not able to sell the lot even if he wanted to, because he'd have an encroachment on his driveway as well as his pool area, which includes those brick columns and his wrought iron fence that surrounds it. Now, the last time I checked in the Grove, it is against the restrictions that no lot can be re-subdivided into a smaller lot. And if that's the case, what he would have to do, he would have to abolish this line anyway, move it so far up to be sure and get clearance that it would go against the restrictions as well. But he's put a lot of money and a lot of time in trying to screen his area from US Highway 62 as well as Turnberry Drive. And like I said, if you just go out there, you can tell by the landscaping and the driveway and the pool area where he has this nice fence surrounding it, that that's his intentions all along, is to use it as one lot, irregardless whether it's two lots or not. And in this case, if he ever sold the property, what would happen is if another owner came in and decided to borrow money on it, which most people do, they would see that this encroaches over that property line, and they would make him come before this commission and make him abolish this line, because obviously it's encroaching over the other lot. Now, Mr. O'Neill is here, as well as Jason Goins, the owner of Siteworks. If you have any additional questions, but I mean, I'll be happy to answer whatever you've got. But as you can see, he's using this property as one lot, and I don't really understand the land use when he's using it as one lot. And if that lot were to stay the same, he actually is in violation because he's built over that lot line.
Could I ask a few questions?
Sure.
When it was purchased originally, he purchased both lots.
Correct.
And then built as if one lot. Did he work through
Correct.
HOA when he did that?
I don't. You have to ask Dr. O'Neill.
Okay, so when we just bought the home a year ago. So the driveway had already been put there before he purchased the home. So we purchased the home with it.
That answers mine.
So we did not extend the driveway or install a fence that is over the property.
It was already in place.
Correct.
But you had to purchase two lots, am I right about that?
Yes. I mean, it was one purchase. It was a buyer to seller. We didn't have real estate agents. And we, since then we've added we have 5 children. And we used to be in the county we moved about 400 yards as the crow flies. We were on Shroon Road. And what really drew us to this property was the extra lot, because 4 of our 5 kids play soccer, and we wanted a place to play soccer. And so we added about 30 trees, evergreen trees, along the front of Turnberry to we didn't want to put a fence in, at least on the 62 side, because we thought it wouldn't look attractive. The neighborhood might shoot it down, because we have to get that approved for the neighborhood.
I have a question, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
So if everything stays the way it is, and you own both lots, and you own the home and all this, what's wrong with that? Why can't it not just stay the way it is?
Well, my wife disagree a little bit. I'd like to do a little more with that lot in terms of adding. I don't like the fact that there's a fence between our lot and where our backyard, which is fenced in currently, where the pool is, because you have to have it fenced in. My understanding is you have to have the pool fenced in. So I have thoughts, my wife disagrees, which that's something that's not for this commission, but I would like to perhaps put something, especially if we have no storage, to put all of the soccer goals, et cetera, and a place to stay out of the sun. So, and that would go over the property line. It would be a roof structure. And as it stands, I don't think I'd be allowed to do that because I'd have to build it.
By the HOA rules? You wouldn't be allowed to do it because of what? The HOA rules or the?
Building.
I'd have to get a building permit to build.
No. Not at all.
And you think if it were
Right, I
two
can-
lots, you would have
I
I'm
can
lost.
elaborate on that just a little bit. Whenever you have a lot that has the same frontage as the principal structure, you can build an accessory structure on the adjacent lot as long as they both face Turnberry in this case and get a building permit for that. It would just have to maintain that 8 feet off the side property line.
But if it were to straddle the lot line, you'd have to abolish the lot line. If the proper, or the optimal placement was over the lot line, you have to come to this board to get the lot line abolished, to get that building permit.
So let me see if I understand. You're talking about taking down the existing wrought iron fence?
Awesome.
Yes, no?
Potentially.
Potentially?
We've only been in the house a year, not even a year. It's only been since June. So we made a few, we didn't, the good thing about this house, we didn't have to make many alterations. However, most people say don't make major changes in a year, buy a house. We're trying to stick to that. However, those are things that I would like to do. We're still trying to work it out between my wife and I to decide what we want to do. But we want to, as he said earlier, we're using the two lots as one lot. And I personally would like to extend the fence line along the back of both properties and put a roof structure that would be not attached to the pool house, but it would be something that would be along the same parallel, which would then cross the property line. And I mean, I'm new. This is new to me. I didn't. So if I'm not using the right language, I apologize. But does that answer your question?
Somewhat,
Okay.
somewhat. I think what you're saying is that you would put a roof, like a shed, not a shed, but more like,
It'd be like a dugout, kind of. I mean, it'd be
kind of, or like a, not a pergola, but something that would be long and have a roof over it. We could, I understand what you're trying to do, but what I was trying to get to is whether you're considering taking down this fence and building across the,
It would have to, yes. Because my hope would be, if we're going to do that, I would include that. Right now, there's a fence with a gate that's in between the lot that we used to play soccer on, wood wall, whatever,
right.
and the fence that's existing now.
So would you build a fence on the other side?
Perhaps that's something we'd have to talk to the Grove neighborhood, because in order
Right,
to
right, of
place a
course.
fence, we have to get approved.
Right,
And that
right.
didn't exist until a few years ago, is my understanding, because there are several different kinds of fences in that neighborhood, so. But I know the process now is we would have to apply and show them what fence we were planning to put up and be approved. I like the natural fence that's we're trying to build now, but the thing I'm talking about would probably, well, would go across that line. And we would have to navigate around the rules about the pool, and if we have to have an enclosed fence, then that's something we may have to.
So what I think I'm hearing is that at this point, what you really want is one lot, but you don't have any real definite plans of what you're going to do with the other part of the property if it does become one lot.
Right, because I want to make sure I make the right decision with what we do with it. I don't want to just, I tend to be a knee-jerk person when it comes to making decisions about our house or plans with our kids. My wife tends to bring me back and say, let's think about this, let's do it the right way, so.
And also, I'd like to add, for any accessory structure, they can't be in the front yard of the home. They do have to be on the side or the rear. So if you extend your pool house, is what I'm understanding, it shouldn't be, but
It shouldn't be what?
in front of the house.
Okay.
Is that where
It
you're
is
at?
not
Want to add on to,
currently-
is your pool house?
It would
It's
be
shown
in
on
addition
here?
to it, it would be separate.
Okay,
And Turnberry is the front of the house?
yes.
Okay. Josh or Mike, can you speak to how this house compares to the neighborhood overall as far as either the square footage or the assessed value? Is it below the average? Is it average? Is it more than average?
I would say it's similar.
I would say it's similar too.
Okay.
As far as the assessed value, I mean, I haven't looked up any values on any of the lots or the houses there, but it looks like it's similar use as the rest of them. Similar built.
Okay.
But so I'm clear, the previous owner had both these lots and put the driveway and the fence and treated it as if it was one lot.
Yes.
And then you purchased it as if it were one lot. And it's two.
We purchased it with the intention of using it as one lot. And when we escrow our taxes with both, and we did borrow some money to buy the house, so those are paid through escrow. But there are, I'm assuming, I know there are 2 tax bills for each lot. They're considered 2 lots.
But you knew that it was 2 lots, you paid 2 HOA dues, and...
Correct.
Yes. So when you purchased it, you were aware of the fact that it was 2
I was aware that
lots?
there was, yes, ma'am.
I'm just trying to figure out at what point did that lot become, because it's beginning to look unsellable to me, if I'm the owner of that lot, other than moving, I'd have to take the driveway out. The fencing would all have to come, or it would go with, and I'm encroaching.
Or they could establish an ingress-egress easement through you all too. I'm just throwing that out there that could happen, not saying that would, but that would be an option.
Well, for fence encroachment, and egress easement wouldn't really apply. It's just an encroachment, nothing really involved in ingress egress.
Right. At this time, with it being 2 lots, he's got his concrete driveway and the brick and the wrought iron fence over the property line. It's an encroachment in that property line. If that lot was ever sold, would obviously have to be moved up and made a much smaller lot, which goes against the Grove's restrictions for re-subdividing.
I have one question. It has to do with the duplexes that are on a similar type facing on the other side of this road.
That's in section 1.
Okay. How does that compare as far as the amount of square footage that it needs? Would it be possible for a duplex to be put on this lot? I mean, I'm asking the question. I really don't know.
No. This has not even been subdivided. In other words, in the restrictions, in section 1, there were just a certain area that was dedicated for townhome use.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of the area was never dedicated for townhome use. So a townhome couldn't be constructed on this no matter what.
Okay. That was you answered my question.
Back to, were there any restrictions prior to this, either through homeowners, and maybe that's a question you can't answer if someone from homeowners is here?
Well, the Grove subdivision is heavily restricted.
Right, I get
drive
that.
out there and tell that.
But apparently you could own 2 lots and you could put a concrete drive and encroach.
Well,
Because that's
I don't
what they
know
did
what
with
was in the
those.
head of the previous owner, but I don't know if the previous owner ever, there are many people that may buy 3 or 4 lots in a subdivision and build over them, because we have to take care of that in the city and the county all the time.
Sure.
And in this case, it looks like when they did it, they intended when they built their home to use it as 1 lot, because they built the concrete drive over it, they built the fence and the pool area over it, and never considered that it went over the property line whatsoever. They just considered it 1 lot. They just happened to be on two different lots in that particular subdivision. But again, if the original owner ever wanted to re-subdivide, it would go against the restrictions, because they can't re-subdivide into smaller lots by the Grove's restrictions. If you understand what I'm saying.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
What is the minimum requirement for a lot in the Grove?
I don't think it has any minimum as far as the size. It was just designed in certain lots. It also obviously has minimum square feet for a house.
Right.
And the construction material of that house. But I mean, these lots are similar to all the other lots in that particular phase of of the grove. The only difference is, of course, in this case, you're fronting out on one of the major routes in the county and in the city. So what the original owner, I'm sure, tried to do is get as far away as he possibly could and use that as his buffer, which in this case, the O'Neills, if you go out there, you'll see even on this new plat that we've submitted, their landscape area, which is just trying to give them as much buffer as they possibly can, not only the Turnberry, but mainly from Blandville Road.
Practically speaking, I mean, if you drive by there and look at this, it's obvious that there's nobody that lot's not gonna be sold for a home to be built on. I mean, never say never, I mean, anything can happen. But if it was, the encroachment would have to be fixed. How do you do that? Either abolish the line, really that's the only way to do it, because moving the line causes, it's a restriction of the homeowners association. You can't make the lot smaller.
Well, and is there any restriction by the homeowners association? Should this be one lot? Is there a restriction? I mean, I understand the dues would, I assume, change. Would the dues change if this were one lot?
Technically, it becomes one, yes.
Okay, so currently it has two dues and
Two fees.
and it would change. Okay, but
Also get two tax bills from the.
would they have any input onto what was put on this lot? I mean, the restrictions that they, I don't know, there are restrictions.
Probably are some, restrictions on what's built there, yeah. If you did an accessory structure of some sort, it would have to be approved, would it not? Probably the finish and the look of it and those sort of things.
Dr. O'Neill, go ahead, Ms. Ramke.
I just feel we're dealing with an intangible in that we don't really know what that's going to be used for. And I think if we had a definite idea, because again, we don't even know if the homeowner association would approve whatever is being thought of to happen to it.
If you don't mind me, I mean, you submitted other waiver plats in this same subdivision that were with no plans of ever doing anything, no encroachments, no reasons at all really that had been approved. Just
Correct.
I didn't know they had to have a strict land use reason. I thought if an individual lot owner wants to abolish the line, why can't he not?
Well-
And there's been just up the road on the same street, there was one that got approved. And this one has some real legitimate concerns on why it should be.
And if I can add to that a little bit to the history, thank you, Jason, for that. That back in January, when we approved that plat for the swimming pool, and then I guess it was in February, I had another inquiry based solely on HOA fees. That's when we began to realize, hey, density's being eroded in this neighborhood. And in phase 1 and phase 2 of the Grove, the city has spent thousands of dollars on the streets, sidewalks, stormwater maintenance, stuff like that. And based on the comprehensive plan, we hope to have a higher population, more housing choice, things like that. So with that in mind, that became a concern, was the erosion of density in this neighborhood. So we could keep it as dense as possible, still look nice, but yet increase population and increase housing choice.
Wouldn't that end up with a restriction? You can only buy one lot and build on one lot.
Exactly. I mean, there should be some restrictions on the subdivision plat. If
I mean,
it's
if I'm
part of
the-
one of these
Excuse me.
tax, whatever, it should be stated, hey, these can never be abolished, and, or something at that time where people will know going in, they can't ever do this. But when we set precedents and other ones have been, why would, I mean, it's a fair point, but when others before this have been approved for really no reason at all, and then now, now all of a sudden, we've kind of switched gears. And
Well, the O'Neills are in the position right now with the improvements they have on there that if that lot was built on with another house, which is what I think is being brought up, not just like a little cottage or something, which would obviously go against the grove's restrictions. But if it had to be re-subdivided, in other words, he would have to abolish this line, number one, and then remove what he's got there because it would be encroaching. And that's not what's going to happen. So if another house was built, we'd have to abolish the line like we're asking now, create another line, which again, I just reiterate that goes against the subdivision regulations, that no lot can be re-subdivided into smaller tracts. So, I mean, he's kind of bound in here where, I mean, he can't really do that, even if he wanted to, unless he disrupts exactly what he's already got here. He's not the one who built it. He just happened to be the one who bought it. It was built this way with 2 lots with the intention on making it, with it being 1 lot, or they wouldn't have built over the line like they have. I don't think any consideration was ever thought of at the time to utilize it as 2 lots. It was always bought with the intention, it appears, to use it as 1 lot. Or they wouldn't have built over the property line like they did.
That's why I was asking about restriction there up on the front end.
Mm-hmm.
If there were restriction there, we've got these other restrictions you mentioned that seem pretty clear. It seemed like someone would have thought about a restriction up front. They wouldn't allow that. It wouldn't put us in this, or the owner in this predicament either.
Well, I can't answer what the first person who built the house, I can't answer why they built it this way, but it is this way as we speak today. I mean, this is the way it is.
It'd be nice to know if they approved. We're assuming that they
I don't know
did.
this for a fact, but I'm speculating here, but I don't believe building a fence and getting permission to build it over the property line is something that would have went to the HOA at the time.
I thought he just said that to build a fence, he had to go before the HOA to get approval.
That changed in the last, my understanding is that's changed the last 2 years because our neighbor, I only know this because our neighbor put up a fence without asking. And
They made him.
I was not happy about it, and this occurred approximately 2 years ago. And this fence that's there now on our property
Right.
has been there for 5 or so. I don't know exactly the timing of when
When it was
the
built.
previous owners purchased the lot. I do know because I asked, he bought the lot primarily because the developer of the neighborhood approached him because he couldn't sell the lot and said, I'll sell it to you for, you name a price, and that's how I bought it.
You know, I want to bring up one point. I mean, we all are saying, you know, that this wrought iron fence in the driveway and it's there and we're kind of looking at it like it's a permanent there. I don't think so, because Plantation subdivision had a gorgeous entrance on it. But the builder didn't listen to the city when they told him it needed to be 6 inches this way, and it got torn down. So I think we need to also remember that just because it's there doesn't mean that that lot line would have to be changed if you try to sell the second lot.
Can I play devil's advocate for a second? Because I apologize for my ignorance, but when we did this, having asked other people in our neighborhood who've done this, they made it sound like a very straightforward process. And I'm not saying this is not straightforward, I'm not complaining about it, but you had made a comment that, well, we don't have any plans for doing anything. Like, well, I don't want to go, I've already spent whatever the cost is for site works to do the site work, and I'm prepared to walk out of here today knowing that you all are going to probably not allow this. Well, why would I go spend money to make plans to build something when I can come back here and I already know I've been denied once? What's the motivation for me to do that? So I'm not trying to be adversarial, I'm just trying to use the same argument. I mean, because we did the same thing on True River where we used to live. We spent a good bit of money with an architect because we couldn't find a house we liked. We just couldn't. We looked and looked and looked and looked, and we were an add-on to our house, and we spent a lot of money with architects. A lot of money's out the window, but I'm okay with that because we found a house that we really like, and we moved with the intention of using this house the way we're currently using it, and have no desire to sell this lot, or we sell it hopefully in 25, 30 years. We intend to sell it as a whole package, and we hope to contend to intend to continue to make it a welcoming place for our kids and their friends and our families.
Dr. O'Neill, quick question. Have you had any conversations with the HOA people that collect those fees or anything like that about, hey, I've got 2 lots, can you make my bill 1 or anything like that?
Because I've asked those other folks who, it just was mentioned in passing, hey, we own 2 lots and we went and abolished the line because we don't pay 2 fees. And,
Sure.
So I'm just basing on past history that they won't do that. And that's not the intention of, I mean, that's a small benefit each year of not having to pay 2 HOA fees.
Right.
But it has the bigger impact of not being able to do what we might want to do with the lots together, either in the near future or in a couple of years when we finalize what we'd like to do.
As Jason explained earlier, I mean, we've done this that I know of, and not that far apart. I mean, we've done this on 2 separate occasions for 2 other individuals when we didn't even know what they were going to build, but they bought 2 lots, and they just happened to build over the property line. But I mean, they bought 2 lots to build a structure and like a pool house and things like this, landscaping in this subdivision. So, I mean, well, we wouldn't have any idea that it would ever be turned down because it's been done before. And I'm not saying that just because it's been done before, it should be done again, but it's something that seems to be just brought up on this particular one because we have done it before and never even thought about it. And it's been approved by this commission on other occasions, and it just appears like it's just shown up all of a sudden.
Well, like I was explaining earlier, whenever the volume of waiver plats in one particular subdivision becomes so much that gathers staff's attention to what's really going on here, and a lot of times that you was mentioning, Mike, it is because of the degradation of density, because of the HOA not so much wanting to work with the homeowners in there. There was a plat that we had discussed earlier today from 2016, I believe it was. I went back and looked at the staff report, but there wasn't no indication of why in there. And I believe that's one that you're referencing, Mike.
Probably so.
Yeah. It's just about a block away from this one, and there is no intent of, we've never been even asked for a reason before to talk around the neighborhood. Oh yeah, we've done that. That's a slam dunk. And so then we get a call from another client. They ask, oh yeah, we've done that before. It's a slam dunk. And we know there's any concern, I could have at least informed the client, hey, well, we need to talk to the city about this and maybe save everybody some time and money on the front end. Well, I had no reason to do that because it's been done so many times in the past.
Chairman, members of the commission, may I have a comment? I can't.
Yes, I just said to Kathy, I want to hear from Tamara.
Let this go on any further with this characterization. The last case that you had, staff outlined pretty much the same reasoning for a recommendation of denial, and that is the fact that we work really hard, myself, our current staff and previous director works really hard to get residential development in. So hard that the commission passed the ordinance to basically incentivize the public infrastructure that's required. When we do that, we look at how many houses we're going to get out of this. Are we going to get 4 houses for a $150,000 investment? Are we going to get 34 houses? So the number of homes served is very important on whether or not we go forward with that development incentive. We went forward with the Groves development incentive because we were getting a good number of residential lots that were developable. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending upon your perspective, you are not required to get a building permit to have a paved surface or to erect a fence. If it was required, it would have been caught, and these encroachments would not have hopefully happened. But in an effort to be very accommodating, the city does not require permits for those kinds of what we consider minor improvements. And I think they are minor improvements because, as you so had mentioned, these can be removed. The only option is not to abolish a property line. When a house gets built, a heck of a lot of heavy equipment get placed on that property, and a heck of a lot of dirt gets pulled up out of the ground. That may be a beautiful fence. It is a beautiful fence. But it too can be moved. This is not something that I would ever characterize as a decision that anyone should take lightly. Because when you get down to the root of planning and zoning, the most basic thing is the subdivision of land. And the only people who have that jurisdiction to determine whether or not it's appropriate are you all, not the homeowners association, not even staff. And you are charged with being the voice of the community on how this community wants to develop. And I would suggest to you that if the community wanted to develop 1.2 acre a subdivision of 1.2 acre lots, it would have developed a subdivision of 1.2 acre lots. It would have done so with less infrastructure. The streets would have been shorter. The storm sewers would have been shorter. All of that would have been much more efficiently designed. But by combining lots like this, you have inefficiencies in the amount of infrastructure we have per residential lot. The other application that was discussed earlier this year, or it was in 2018, you decided that there were unique constraints to that situation. And that is fine, and that is exactly your role. But I would suggest to you that there are not unique constraints to these two particular lots. And I would suggest to you that precedent of just because one lot line has been abolished in this subdivision means that they all can be, that argument does not hold water because all situations are not the same. And so I would like to urge you to take those items under consideration. And, well, I'm going to stop before I put my foot in my mouth.
Can I understand that, when did we realize we hit the tipping point?
Mm-hmm.
When did that happen? Just with this case, or last year at the last case, or the case before that? Or when did the red flag come up with staff that said, hey, this one ain't going to go, or shouldn't go? And that's...
I wouldn't have characterized it as a tipping point. But what I would characterize it as is evaluating each situation on its merits, not as a blanket, it's okay here, it's not okay here.
Right.
We look at these two lots in their context between each other and in the context of the subdivision as a whole. I guess the big red flag was, didn't we just have one of these? And so it does look a little odd because the frequency that's occurring. And I mean, let's just face facts. How many homes are in the Grove, and how many undeveloped lots are there? Can we expect each one of those to then abolish and combine with another?
That was the question I was going to ask. How many single lots are there that are owned by adjacent homeowners?
I don't have the answer to that.
Because that
Because,
would, if this is the last one, that certainly has an impact. If there's half a dozen more that potentially could come up, that has an impact.
well, I would also suggest to you that tearing down a house is not necessarily out of the ordinary.
Grove subdivision, I'd say it probably would be.
Yeah.
No, it's just a matter of time. It's a relatively new subdivision. It would not be, if this becomes routine with no differentiation between this situation and other situations, I could very easily see someone wanting to be in that neighborhood and buying two houses and taking one down. It happens.
The one concern that I see, that I know the fence can be removed and the concrete, but if you look at the radius from where the skirt to the driveway is, you come off the property line 6 foot and you cut that driveway back off the property line 6 foot to build onto the other property line, your radius to turn into the current garage would probably not be enough to allow a car to get in the garage. So it looks like a problem from even the very beginning. If you're going in, you have to come off that property line 6 foot toward the dwelling. So then you wouldn't be able to get a car turned in the driveway, in the current garage. So it looks like it was approved as it was one lot to me from the very beginning.
I guess we'd have to know
I'm
what
not
the size of the
understanding.
driveways are on the other properties, and could they get into the garage? I mean, I don't know.
We'll make it a short radius if you come off that property line 6 foot and into the concrete. I don't know if you could get a car around and into the driveway.
Well, you could come forward with the driveway.
An aisle width in a parking lot, and you can't back up too much further than what the aisle is, otherwise you hit another car. The standard is 22 to 24 feet. And it looks like this would be 30,
It's 30
if I'm
going in.
understanding your configuration
No, it's
description.
30 going in, but then you have to have a radius to turn into the current garage because the door is on the side of the adjacent lot. That's why the concrete extended over property line to allow the cars to turn in.
It's also allow the cars, once they pull into the garage, to have room to back out into that extra space and
Then
then
pull
go
out.
safely, rather than having to back all the way out into a busy street like Turnberry is. That's why the space was designed for that.
Another design would facilitate would facilitate someone backing out of that garage and going headfirst out onto Turnberry.
They use that space that's encroaching over the line. That's where they back out.
Well, of course they use it. It's paved.
Well, it's concrete.
Well, it's hard surfaced. Of course they use it. It's supposed to.
But it was designed for that use in particular.
But it can be designed to accomplish the same thing without that.
But why would you want to, I don't understand, and I don't live there, but I don't understand why, since it was designed that way, why it seems to be so easy that you can take all this up when he's purchased the house for a certain price. They built the design by an architect, construction company, home builder. It was designed to get as far away from the highway as possible, but still they needed plenty of room. Obviously, this is a nice house, nice improvements. They don't want to be restricted. I'm sure you can tell just by going out there and looking at it, you wouldn't want to be restricted to take off the concrete and have to pull in on a very tight radius and then have to back all the way out on Turnberry to get in. It wouldn't be appropriate. It wasn't the intention of that particular builder, I'm sure, for that, which is why he built over it. And again, just last year.
I don't think you can imply the intention. I mean, if you weren't the builder, how can you imply his intention?
Well, you can go out there and see what his intention was.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a nice home. He expected many vehicles to be in there. He's pulling out, he's going into his garage, and he's pulling out. But again, it was just last fall that we got one that was approved here, that particular house that got built on it is not even as big as this, but we brought it before the commission, and we just abolished the line because he didn't have enough room to put his structure over the one lot. He purchased 2 lots, and we abolished the line. We had no trouble whatsoever. And you can look it up, it's under Marcus Burnett, and it was just a block away that we got it approved. And we had no problems whatsoever at that time.
It was a different circumstance.
What was the difference in the circumstances?
Apparently, the Planning Commission found that there were different constraints on those lots.
We had one approved in 2016, 1 block away, that had no constraints. The property owner, you know what, I want to consolidate, I don't want this line here, I want 1 lot. It was approved, there's no encroachments, nothing proposed to be built, nothing. This has some, so I agree that everything's different. Every case should be looked at different, but this one has many more good reasons than that one did.
I'm sorry, I'm getting a text from my wife that my son's been waiting for 20 minutes at the soccer field by himself, so I'm going to have to go. But one thing, I appreciate everyone's input and your comments. Tamara,
yeah.
I understand your perspective, I do. I really, our sole intention is if this lot was a viable lot to be sold, I probably wouldn't be advocating for this because I look at it as an investment. I might want to sell it down the road, but we have zero intention of doing that. And we intend on using these 2 lots as 1 lot. If you were to drive by, the main reason for us wanting to develop this lot is to protect our kids from 62 and the noise, or we've had a number of break-ins along that in that neighborhood lately, and so I'm doing everything I can to protect our home and my investment, which is my family. So with that, I'm sorry I have to leave, but I can't leave my kid at the soccer field for any longer. So I appreciate your time, so thank you, whatever you all decide.
Thank you.
Ms. Tracy, suppose I'm a prospective home buyer or an empty lot buyer in a subdivision. Mm-hmm. You said earlier that the planning department is kind of making the determination on whether to recommend approval or denial of subdivision, of removing a lot line on a case-by-case basis. If I'm in the market for a lot or a home and I see one that has 2 lots next door to each other, mm-hmm. how am I to know whether the planning commission will ultimately approve that or not? If I look at it and I say I want to buy both of those lots so that I can adjoin them, or that I can abolish the lot line and make them 1 lot, are you proposing that those prospective home buyers come to the planning department in the future and ask what the planning department's take will be on that specific lot?
I would also always recommend that as a first phone call. The other thing is a person could look at, look at if there have been any incentives provided to that developer on behalf of the city. I mean, these are the community's tax dollars that we are giving to a developer to subsidize the construction of that infrastructure. And if that's happened, I would not encourage you to combine those lots.
I 100% see your point. The unfortunate piece is we haven't put those constraints on those dollars at the beginning, and now we're paying the price for it and trying to constrain those dollars on the back end. So I would hope that if we have the opportunity to incentivize a development in the city in the future, that we would put, similar to deed restrictions through the developer, we would put those restrictions on here as well.
You do that on the plat.
So,
and that
So what you're saying is that we should say that we have rules, but we really mean these rules,
Well, that's,
especially? And you could kind
think
of, the
it's
other
fair
ones
to
kind of go
say-
ignore, because that's what we've done here with the subdivision.
We
is
have
these
that.
are rules.
well, we have said that, gee, this was a great idea, but we didn't execute very well. And have allowed a precedent to take place. I know that is, a lot of that happened long before you got here, but
Well, I don't think last year's was a precedent, because that constraint, those lots were different. They had significant elevation changes. So I think that was a different, that was a,
would you feel better if we went through, if we allowed time for staff to go through on a case-by-case basis in this subdivision would that help? To have more time to analyze those cases of why those are different than this one?
I would still like, I think that the question that was asked before about how many more of these vacant lots are there in this subdivision, I mean, that's something I would like to know. I really would like
Is
to
that
just
in
know
the
more
packet?
about what's
Well-
available.
in their packet.
No, how many? I don't think I've got the whole
Then I think I'd like to move the table.
thing. I think I've just got.
That's probably a good idea.
Can I ask another
Yeah,
question?
right there's a pretty good example on page 2 of the staff report. I mean, this is a relatively new subdivision.
Unfortunately, that doesn't show us if those empty lots are owned in, by same people or multiple
Well,
people.
by the adjacent property
Yes, thank
owner.
you. I couldn't put
That's
that in
what we're
words.
It
looking
really wouldn't make any difference, because the guy with the house could still buy the empty lot.
Good.
So whether he owns it now or not, he could buy it. And as she said earlier, if there's two houses and one's torn down, because I think we're looking 20, 30 years from now, too. I mean, we're not just talking about today. So it's possible that there could be an extra vacant lot years from now that there isn't now.
It happens a lot in the nicer neighborhoods like that, where you're building $500,000 homes and higher, that they want bigger yards, and they buy 2 lots. It happens all the time.
It's an estate type
Yeah, exactly.
desire, yeah.
And that's relative to my question. The city's making an investment with our dollars, all of our dollars. What's the return? Somebody surely has figured the return on that investment. We have to have X amount of density. That's why I called it a tipping point. That is the correct term. We are either there or we're not. So apparently right now we're not, and that's the concern that you have. Am I reading this right?
Well, it is a new subdivision, so we can't finalize out those numbers yet. But I also know that when you have larger lots and you know ahead of time that you're going to have a certain number of lots, you can design the subdivision so that you have less linear footage of roads and storm, et cetera, et cetera. But when you're designing for more lots, you have to have a certain amount of frontage for each one. And so the linear number is larger. So,
So
it's
with
just
that, is
it's
there a return on
mathematical.
investment that is considered with, maybe it isn't talked about that way, but at some point, we reach a point where we're satisfied that we, through PVA, have now assessed and taxed enough that
Certainly for Phase 1, which was, you said the infill agreement was in 2003, and that's barely built out by now. Phase 2 is not, but we have a lot less invested there. I think if that's part of the decision-making process you want us to consider, that would be nice to be armed with those figures, wouldn't it?
We will throw as many figures as you want.
May I add just one more thing? I mean, I'm the one that designed the Grove subdivision several years ago for the developers, which were John Davis, George Churchill, and Larry Hickey. I designed it. We would have, in my mind, I would have liked to have made more bigger lots, but the only thing is when the developer tells you he wants so many lots in a certain area, obviously you make them, and when you bring that up to those developers, the developer said it's no problem, all they have to do is buy 2 lots and they can build in the middle of them. And that's the criteria that they give you. So in their minds, when this subdivision was designed, and I am the one who designed it, the lots were actually made smaller in case somebody wanted to build $1 million homes like are being built in this subdivision. They could obviously buy 2 lots, 3 lots, wherever they wanted. At the time, it wasn't any problem. They just considered they'd abolish the line, make the house bigger, or make a pool house, make the driveway over, like this person did, and that's how it came about.
Well, one thing that I would, just from glancing at this, and since you're the designer, you can tell me, it appears to me that the lots in Section 1 are quite a bit smaller than the lots in Section 2. Is that correct?
That's correct generally, yes. Some of them aren't that way, but yeah, there's Section 2. I guess they finally got the word, and we did make it a little bit larger, yes. But a lot of that had to do with the contours because that area was completely different than the first section, which was more flat and more even, and this section had quite a bit of hills.
They calling you or calling us? Sorry.
But at the time when we did the subdivision, we never dreamed that we would ever have a problem with abolishing the line. It had never been brought up before. And just last year, like I said, just across the street in 1 block from Marcus Burnett, who's a big home builder in this community. I mean, he bought 2 lots because his house was too big. He needed a large area for his driveway and his garage. We brought it before the commission just last fall, and we abolished the line in between there, and he built a home.
We would agree that improvements to that lot of any kind would also improve the tax base.
Correct.
So either way, obviously a house would be a huge improvement to a lot, but
Exactly.
He'd have to sell, this man would have to sell the lot to get the house. He already owns a lot.
But I would invite the commission, I mean, to go out there and look at it. You can tell it's being used as 1 lot, and it always has been. It's even more so now with his landscaping and the way he's using it. And there's no way you would ever see another house if you went out there and looked at it.
What's your pleasure?
The motion on the table is, on it
I know
as
the motion's
is.
on the table. He had mentioned before that he might want to table the motion. That's the reason why I'm asking.
You think we need more information
From whom?
from staff?
Like what? What would you request that they give us?
Return on investment that was discussed, the densities that are already there.
Well, I have a question of Tamara, if that, I have no problem with that. But when the city participates in the infrastructure of these things, do they then say how many homes they need to be there to be able to get a return? In other words, is the 34 homes tied into the amount the city gave for the infrastructure? If it is 34, I don't know
Well,
what the
since
number
I'm
is.
working on 4 of them right now, we evaluate the dollar investment, we evaluate the number of lots that are proposed, and we look at the lots as this is a lot, therefore it's a house. We always do, I mean, what our portion of the investment, we're definitely going to get back in terms eventually, especially if it's
It's just the time.
hard.
How long is it going to take us to get that back?
It's about how long and how much more, because we're about growth and we're about those tax dollars fund a lot more than just City Hall. It goes to the schools, goes to all the others. And so what we want to make sure happens is that we maximize our return on our investment, and we also want to make sure that what we are subsidizing is the housing need that is, by the information that we have, is the housing that's needed. That's why you see a variety of incentives, because they're trying to get at different housing options, because we want to have a wide variety of options. That's why you have the upper story residential incentive. It's why you have the Fountain Avenue incentive. It's why it's why you have this residential brand new subdivision incentive, because those are all the different options, and we want more even. So we don't enter into these agreements with every single project. We spearhead the ones that we think are going to give us a good return.
Well, the question would be, in a lot line abolishment, say it's in a subdivision where there are no infill agreements or subsidies, would it be passed or not passed?
Again, it's very situational. It depends on what the start is and what the end is, and then its context. I can very easily imagine yes and no, both answers. It depends on the context.
That just made my decision to move to table.
This is, one more second before we make that motion. This is the you've made the motion?
He's already made the motion.
I guess we got to address that first.
Yes, let's do. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second by Mr. Morrison. So now we have to consider whether we want to table this motion. Okay, that's what we're voting on right now, whether we want to table the motion. Call the roll, please.
Okay. That was Mr. Morrison that seconded?
Yes, he
Okay.
seconded, yes.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Benberry?
No.
Mr. Bradford?
No.
Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Ms. Schramke?
Aye.
Mr. Shadle?
Aye.
Chair Casillas?
Aye.
2.
So the motion is tabled until
Table.
a date certain, I would say our next meeting.
Yes.
But I still think we need to know what we're asking for.
Yes,
What do we
ma'am.
want
Specifics.
staff to give us?
So far, I have a number of lots built upon, ownership of those lots, return on investment, and those are the 3 things I have so far.
And past occurrences.
In other subdivisions, or?
Yeah, what we've done in the past in these like.
Right. I think we should
Like to
consider that
this.
as well.
Well, not just restricted to this subdivision, you're saying, to others.
I think so.
Well, what I started saying a moment ago, and I think it's relevant to additional information to be provided to us. I was going to say that this is the 3rd waiver of subdivision application that the staff has recommended denial in the last however many months, it's been within a year. One was in Fairfield subdivision, an older established neighborhood that I don't think there was any incentives such as this applicable. And then this is number 2 in the Grove. So I understand why, according to staff's comments here tonight, it would fit into that rationale. So I guess I'd like to know where the discrepancy is there, why there was a recommendation of denial in Fairfield as well.
Yeah, right.
To be clear on the procedure, this is brought back up, to vote on the original motion was
Correct.
denied. So for whatever reason.
Oh, wait. The original motion is still out there.
It's still out there.
So, but if it kind of got to where you guys thought this should be approved, or what happened? So the denial is you vote no against, and then somebody would have to bring a motion to approve? Is that the way it works?
No, we have to remove it from the table, okay? Then the original motion is in effect,
Okay.
which would be, the original motion as read was to deny, okay? We can still override that motion, or we can vote in favor of that motion. But the motion as read was to deny, okay?
So it's
Is that clear?
So then if the motion's to deny is you get more votes, nay votes on that, does that mean it's
Right.
automatically approved? Or
Then
there had to be another motion to approve?
I think we would have to immediately have a motion to approve. Yeah. That's what I would
Or
feel
a-
comfortable with.
Or amend the original motion,
Or amend the original motion.
which I think is
Yeah.
how we've done in the past.
We have, but, that would be up
Either
to
way.
the commission to decide if that's what they want to do when we take the motion from the table. Is that clear? Okay.
Is there any other information you want us to provide you?
I'd like to know, just for my information, the size of the lots, where the 2 lots have been put together to make 1 lot. I'm still looking at this and going, these are, and I know a lot of it has to do with the contours of the particular lots that are there. But I'm looking at these and wondering, the ones where they built over 2 lots, what the sizes of those lots were. I'm just wanting that for my information, to compare it with the lots that we're looking at.
And I would also like to see the infill agreements themselves.
Okay.
Sure.
Because the contractors obviously agreed to it originally.
I wonder if we could request the homeowners association agreement, because I don't know if they restrict anything if we approve it, or whatever we do. So maybe there's something in there that might be a moot point, whatever we're trying to do. The
But
homeowners
it's
association.
important to know, because we don't want to go against what their covenants are.
Well, those can be changed, and we may or may not have the latest copy, but we'll do our darndest to find it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Don't they usually file those in the deed book?
Yes, usually being the operative word.
And that's why I said they could change and not be filed, but that's,
Well, perhaps our homeowner has a copy
Yeah.
of it.
Sure.
And he just recently bought his home, so maybe he
Correct.
would share that with us.
Yeah, but sometimes they are moving, and maybe you don't like that term either, but a bit of a moving target, like you mentioned with the fencing thing. I've been involved in those things. You could have horses, and then you couldn't have horses.
That would seem like more than a fence, actually.
Well,
Anyway.
if they're your horses, they're pretty important.
Okay, moving on to the next item of business, Mr. Morrison, I believe you have that.
Find it. Yes, ma'am, I do. I move that this commission receive and file the application of Charles and Patricia Neer for the proposed re-subdivision of property located at 292 and 296 Alvin Barkley Drive. I further move that the requested waiver of the public hearing and the dedication of streets be given and approval of the submitted plat be given.
Second.
Second by Ben Berry.
There is a revision on the 11 by 17 that was in your packets. The original plat that was submitted to staff showed a diagonal line, and staff had outlined some reasons why it should be squared off at the end. which was relayed to Mr. Tosh, and he revised the plat accordingly. The one on the 11/17 is the one he's brought to the meeting, and we're comfortable recommending approval.
This is existing as 2 lots today. The existing lot line comes back directly in front of the garage, makes a 90-degree turn, goes over about 20 feet, and then comes down beside the existing garage. The landowner wishes to you see the line running parallel to the existing drive back to a point just in front of the garage to the side. Then we're squaring back up with the side lot lines and coming back to the existing rear corner as it is.
Do they intend to build?
No,
house?
they want to have this lot as a buildable lot, but they're not planning to build on it. They're going to sell it.
Okay. But the intention would be for someone to build on the squared off property in the back?
Yes,
That's what I thought.
Yes. You can get, I think it's a little over 5,000 square foot footprint.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more than adequate size for a home.
Yeah.
And the frame garage that would remain there being 14.44 feet, that is acceptable, or is that too close, or?
No, that's acceptable.
Sounds like
It's a
6 foot.
accessory building.
And I don't remember what the,
Is it 8 feet?
8 feet.
8 feet,
outside.
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking 15 for some reason.
All right. Are there any other questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Ms. Shramky?
Aye.
Mr. Shadle?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Benberry?
Aye.
Mr. Bradford?
Aye.
Chair concedes.
Aye. If there is no other business to come before the commission tonight, please stand adjourned. It is 6:42.